Welcome back. President Trump delivering a groundbreaking speech in a global call to arms against terror coming out of the Middle East.
There is still much work to be done. That means honestly confronting the crisis of Islamic extremism and the Islamists and Islamic terror of all kinds.
Well, the president focused on reconciliation and working together, yet his critics pounced on his use of the phrase Islamist. But do they really even know what that term means? Joining us now to weigh in is Dr.qanta Ahmed, and she certainly knows. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. So as we just mentioned, lots of people this morning talking about how he did not use the phrase radical Islamic terrorism, which we heard a lot all through the campaign. Right. Instead said Islamist extremism. What is the difference?
I mean, to the layperson, radical Islam, manifestations of radical Islam, we recognize suicide bombings, terrorism, attacking ships, attacking transport centers. But to the political scientist, Islamism is a very precise term, and I'm thrilled that he's used it. It is the imposter totalitarian ideology that mimics Islam, that the Muslim Brotherhood would have you believe is real Islam, but is actually seeking to subjugate Muslims and non-Muslims in a fictional caliphate. It has at its center enmity with all things secular, which includes the United States, the Free West, any Muslim like me that refuses to give them that privilege. So it was excellent, but he was also very inclusive in his speech. He used words including extremism. He talked about terrorism. It was encompassing both an audience of professionals and lay people.
So by that, would you say that if he had used radical Islamic terrorism as he did during the campaign, that is a more offensive and a broader ranging? Does that kind of sweep the entire world up into that?
So
the entire Muslim world?
Great question. I mean, for years I've been on this network and others arguing that I don't like the phrase radical Islam. It makes it sound like there's something primordially, fundamentally wrong with Islam, which is absolutely not true. But to an ordinary person, and even I've met with diplomats in the Muslim world and elsewhere, very commonly we use this term radical Islam. It is more accurate to say Islamism, and Islamism is not only violent. We only think of the violent. The non-violent, I feel, is much more dangerous. That's driving the politics of Iran. That's the Muslim Brotherhood ideology. Non-violent Islamist ideology underpins all the motives for violence.
The goal here was to unify the Muslim world in the fight against ISIS and the fight against terrorism. How do you think that the president did in terms of that, in terms of his speech, and then compare it to what President Obama tried to do?
So beyond my expectations, and my expectations were very high, I think that this has really touched Muslims, ordinary people, Muslim leaders, in its frankness, its candor, and its humility. And it was as if the president was actually speaking directly to Muslims as he stood next to us and with us, rather than being on a podium and looking down on us. I mean, physically the arrangement was different when President Obama gave the speech, but also the approach and the sentiment was different. We could see this president's intentions were absolutely foundational and unifying in terms of humanity. So I feel it was an incredibly moving topic. He talked about the soul. He talked about the lost, unvanquished dreams of generations of Muslims lured into extremism. It was incredibly moving.
Well, let's get to just a couple of the headlines that came out of this. We want to read you a few of them. I want to ask you about one specifically. Sure. Here's what Newsweek had to say. Trump's Islam speech in Saudi Arabia follows a long history of verbal attacks and policies targeting Muslims in America and abroad. The LA Times, beneath there, Trump's speech draws mixed reaction, including plenty of anger from around the world. And I want you to comment on this third one here from CNN. On Islam, Trump is consistently inconsistent. CNN, one of the president's biggest critics at this point. But do they have a point there with that headline?
So very interestingly, I will use the words of Muslims that I was with in Egypt, which is a leader in the fight against radical Islam. And you could see from this gathering how close Egypt Egypt is the United States by the proximity of President al-Sisi. Egyptian soldiers and officers actually spoke to me about how President Trump is not an enemy of the Muslims. He is an enemy of the bad Muslims, Daesh, ISIS. This is from ordinary Muslim Egyptian officers, Kuwaiti officers too. So those of us at the front line of really combating jihadism, soldiers, as we've just heard from a U.S. soldier, former U.S. soldier, really understand that he's consistent. Like me, the president demonizes the operative that would damage my religion and fellow human beings through this radical ideology.
Well, moving forward, we know that the president is headed next to Israel. That's where he's landing today, and we're going to bring you back again in the next hour to talk a little bit more about that and your thoughts.
Look forward to it.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.